Hello, I'm Donna Lowry, a Capitol correspondent for Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. This is the runoff debate among Republican candidates for Congressional District 10. Let's meet the candidates for this debate. They are in alphabetical order. Mike Collins is an entrepreneur and business owner. Vernon Jones is a former member of the Georgia House of Representatives and CEO of DeKalb County. Now let's meet our panelists. Rahul Bali is a politics reporter for WABE in Atlanta, and Emma Hurt is a reporter with Axios Atlanta. For complete rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by each panelist. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer each question. Emma Hurt, you get the first question of Vernon Jones.
Representative Jones, are you open to any compromise gun control proposals being discussed by members of both parties in Washington right now, specifically so-called red flag laws or expanded background checks?
Well, let me say, first of all, America needs more God, not more gun control. You know, if we can send $40 billion to Ukraine, why can't we send money to our public schools to make them safe and protect our children? I went to Houston to the NRA meeting. I didn't bow or cave in to the liberals and the media like my opponent did. I went there and I stood tall with the NRA. Why? Because I support the Second Amendment. That's important. At the same time, I want to make sure that Joe Biden does not take away my God-given right because he thinks that is his right. Having a gun, protecting your family is important, and I will stand always with the Second Amendment.
All right. Would you like Mr. Collins, would you like a rebuttal?
Yes, ma'am, please. First of all, I did not boycott the NRA convention out there. We were in the district campaigning. Unfortunately, my opponent can't raise money in the district, so what does he do? He travels out there to try to con those people into giving him money. I have always been a proponent of the Second Amendment, 100%. That is our God-given right, and I will fight for that every day.
Thank you. We're going to move on. Rahul, your question.
Questions to Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, I want to ask you about something you tweeted out. Election integrity is infrastructure. You're running for Congress. What is the role of the federal government when it comes to elections? Is it, whether it's something as big as an agency that oversees elections around the country or something like standards, whether it's standards on machines or balloting? What would be the role for the federal government? What would you do in Congress?
The federal government has no role in the elections. That is a state's rights. That is states' right. That is their job to handle their elections. And no, the federal government shouldn't be involved in that.
Okay. Emma, your question for Mike Collins.
Mr. Collins, understanding that you are a proponent of the Second Amendment, but are you open to any compromise gun control legislation that's being discussed in Washington, so-called red flag laws, expanded background checks?
I am absolutely opposed to red flag laws. I am 100% adamant that the Second Amendment is written right. There is no changing it. We do have problems. We don't have a gun control problem in this country. We don't have a gun problem in this problem. What we have is a cultural problem where we have removed God from every facet of our life, be it from the schools, from prayer, even television. That's where we've got to get back to where the sanctity of life means something. The other thing we need to do, we need to secure our schools. By God, after 9/11, we secured our airports, where you can't get through the airport unless you go through security. We should have that. That should be first and foremost with our students and with our children, that we arm people in school, we teach them how to use those weapons, and that we protect our children. The third thing that we haven't done that we need help with, we need to start funding our police, our first responders. We need to be training them. We don't need to be defunding them. That's why you're in this predicament that we're in now.
Thank you very much. Rahul, you get the final question in this round for Vernon Jones.
Mr. Jones, you held a press conference this morning to talk about the idea of closed party primaries, and that's the idea of Republicans and Democrats not crossing over to vote in those primaries. Now, this would have to go through the Georgia legislature, but down at the Capitol, they listen to people who are members of Congress on a number of things. You know that as someone who served. What does that look like? Do Georgians then have to register either as a Democrat or Republican or as an independent? Could independents vote in either one? And how close to an election could someone change parties to vote?
Yeah. Let me correct something that Mike said earlier. The federal government does have a role in our elections. As a matter of fact, there's federal law that says that you cannot destroy records, election records within 22 months. But we saw in Georgia where records were destroyed, you have to keep them at least 22 months. So enforcing the federal law, but he doesn't know about that. Secondly, yes, I support, and I had a press conference today making sure that we have legislation where Republican voters vote in Republican primaries and Democrat voters vote in Democrat primaries. Mike is a prime example of the abuse. He said that Jody Hice was too liberal, and he mailed out to mailers in a runoff. He mailed to mailers to Democrats, telling Democrats to cross over and vote in the Republican primary. Now, this is factual. It was reported by the AJC, it was reported by radio stations, it was reported widely, because he is a rhino, and he needed Democrats to help him get elected. If you want to run as a Democrat, I would suggest, my friend, run as a Democrat, not as a Republican.
Thank you.
what about
Mr. Collins, a rebuttal first.
Thank you. First of all, that was just another lie by Vernon Jones, as usual. He makes up stuff as he goes along. That was a lie back then. It was a hit within a week of that primary, and there was no truth to it. But I will tell you this. We do need to have closed primaries, and we don't need to have crossover votings. My opponent, who came out for Donald Trump in 2020, then turned around and crossed over and voted in the presidential primary. I think the only real question we have is, who do you vote for, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or Bernie Sanders?
Thank you very much. Raul, did you have a follow-up? And we're going to go.
There's a response.
We're going
to
to try to continue here.
Okay.
Just a yes or no, independence.
Well, I'd like to respond because I voted in the Democratic primary. I voted for President Trump in the general election. But let me be clear. Eric Erickson said Mike Collins, the son of former Congressman Mike Collins, is trying very hard to grab his dad's old congressional seat. He's even willing to use Democrat votes to do it. He also said hopefully conservatives will not reward the campaign thuggery and coordinated hijinks to shift the 10th Congressional District to Mike Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
And there's a record of it there.
Thank you.
There's a record.
Gentlemen, we really need to move on so that we can have more in this debate. So that concludes the first round of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to their opponent. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and the candidate who asks the question will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Each candidate will get 2 questions, and by random selection, Mike Collins, you may ask the first question.
Thank you. Vernon, why did you vote against the heartbeat bill twice? Why did you, in your own words, threaten to put pro-abortion Democrats in power if the heartbeat was passed? And why did you, in your own words, say abortion should be legal up to the moment of birth?
Okay, first of all, my record is clear. I took the same position that Georgia Right to Life took. And that position was that life starts at conception, not at 6 weeks. Also, let's be clear, the Georgia Right to Life wanted no exceptions in that bill. I support no exceptions for abortion. Mike wants exceptions, I do not. And as a matter of fact, the Georgia Right to Life, not only were they opposed to the bill, but they actually rescinded the endorsement for the Republicans that they supported. And so if Mike want to say that he's pro-life or not, he can say it, but he's for life with exceptions. I am pro-life all the way, and that's why I took the position I took on that bill. I am pro-life all the way.
Mr. Collins, your rebuttal.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I have always stated, and I've always been and always will be, 100% pro-life, period, no exceptions. This is just obvious. Vernon Jones is a con man. And what you have to do is look and see, who do you trust? Who do you trust in such important issues as life? Somebody that's been a corrupt 30-year career politician who has been out there beating the drum for pro-abortion activists his entire life. I think that's what we're getting down to. It's just a trust issue.
Vernon Jones, you get the next question.
Okay. Mike, you were in a race against Jody Hice in a runoff in 2014. Now, several media outlets, including the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tim Bryant with the radio, and other outlets said that you mailed to Democrats. Now, are you calling them a liar and Jody Hice a lie? Are all of them a lie, or are you the liar?
I am saying, first of all, that was a hit job. It was a lie. It's still a lie. It was a hit job at the very end of that campaign to move the votes out of our favor. I have never been in favor of crossover voting, unlike you who did vote in the Democrat presidential primary, unlike you who has to have Democrat consultants out there on your payroll at the top who have actually been on probation. I would never even have a Democrat consultant on my team, much less you have someone out there in the southeastern portion of this district who's been well known to pay people to go vote. So I don't think I have a problem with ever asking anybody. I have never asked anybody to cross over.
Mr. Jones, your rebuttal.
Yes. First of all, you try to send someone to pay me to get out of this race. Secondly, you don't want to accept responsibility. You were running against Jody Heights. You know that you sent that mailer to Democrats. You know why? His dad is a Democrat. He was raised a Democrat. It's in his blood. If you want to run as a Democrat, then run as a Democrat. Don't try to get Democrat voters to vote in a Republican primary. And that's what you did. So you don't want to accept responsibilities. Everybody's lying except you. Everybody's lying. So, Mike, admit to the people, look at the 10th Congressional District folks and tell them that you did mail to Democrats to get them to vote for you.
Mr. Collins, you may ask your second question.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to take the time to answer. My dad was a Republican starting in the late 70s. Folks, I was less than 10 years old at that time. He started the Butts County Republican Party, became a well-known stalwart for this country and for this state as a hard conservative Republican. As a matter of fact, when I was 18, I started the Republican Party down at Georgia College, which I was a member of. And I have been a member of the Republican Party and the chairman of the Republican Party in Butts County.
We do need you to move on to your question, though, please.
Mr. Jones, I don't have another question for Vernon Jones other than the fact that he has spent his entire life as a Democrat. His entire life has been a corrupt career politician. I have the ability to take my business and my business sense of being in the hardest industry there is in this country and take that to the people of the 10th District and represent them and get our country back on track.
So, Mr. Jones, you can respond.
Again, he's lied. He lied to you about mailing to Democrats. He lied to you about his own daddy. His daddy was elected to the Butts County Board of Commissioners as a Democrat. He was raised as a Democrat. He's the great pretender. He pretends to be this, and he's really that. Mike is a rhino. Ask Jody Heights, ask the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ask Tim Bryant. He mailed to Democrats because he felt that Jody Heights was too conservative and that they needed a liberal. He's a liberal rhino. And what about corruption? He took $1 million of PPP loan and loaned it to his personal campaign. Now, it's okay to get a PPP loan, but to say that you sign a document and say that you can't pay it back, but then you go and loan your campaign $500,000 immediately after you qualify for office, that's being a crook. He can't tell you anything I've been charged and convicted on anything, but he is the crook. He stole hard-earned taxpayers' dollars, your money and my money. Everybody else paid it back, but he can't pay it back. He put it in his pocket and he put it in his business.
Mr. Collins, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
That is Vernon Jones at his core right there. That is a corrupt Democrat from DeKalb County all the way. Let's talk about that PP and get that straightened out right now. Yes, I participated in that program. Yes, I had 100 employees out there, 100 truck drivers that needed help to keep their food on their table, and that's what we used that program for. Unfortunately now, Vernon Jones took that program out twice in 2 different states. And he has yet to even settle up on his. So, Vernon, you didn't even have any employees.
Now, that's a first lie. I've never taken out 2 loans. Secondly, the PPP loan, a self-employed person can get one. And thirdly, he never gave it to his employees. They bought new personal vehicles for him and his family, but the employees, the truckers, never got a dime.
Mr. Jones, you can ask your final question in this round.
Okay. Mike, I want to say again, did your dad not get elected in Butts County as a Democrat, and you were raised as a Democrat?
My dad got elected as county commissioner.
Yes or no? Did he get elected as a Democrat?
And then Jimmy Carter helped him see the light, and he started the Butts County Republican Party.
Jimmy Carter, the biggest Democrat
and from then on, he was a Republican and a very conservative Republican. My dad's not on the ballot here either. And as a matter of fact, when my dad became a Republican, I was less than 10 years old. So I have been raised.
Did your dad get elected as a Democrat in Georgia? Did he or did he not? Tell these people in the 10th
was
Congressional District, tell them. Did he or did he not?
I'll tell you what, Vernon Johnson, for the past
Did he
30
or did
years,
he not?
You have been elected as a
He cannot answer the question. That goes to show you
has led
he is corrupt.
down the way.
He's a liar. He lied on Jody Heights. He lied on the AJC. He's lied on everybody. Did your daddy get elected as a Democrat in Butts County or not?
My dad was a county commissioner in Butts County in the late 70s.
Was he a Democrat?
He was elected.
Did he elect as a Democrat? Was he elected as a Democrat?
My dad swapped over
Gentlemen.
and was as a...
We're going to need to move on. Thank you very much.
I wish you would answer the question.
That concludes our second round. For those of you just joining us, this is the runoff debate between Republican candidates for the Congressional District 10. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates. I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Rahul Bali, you get the first question in this round.
Question is to Mr. Jones, and it's in reference to an issue back in the 10th Congressional, and it's the proposed Rivian electric vehicle plant, an issue that both of you gentlemen have discussed. Is there a role for and there's been opposition, a minority opposition in that area to the plant. Is there a role, if you're in Congress, when it comes to Rivian, whether it's through EPA permits or something through congressional legislation for those who oppose the Rivian plant in Morgan and Walton counties?
Well, first of all, this was a local issue. And local people should have had some input, and they didn't have the input. It's about transparency. I'm for job creations, but I'm also for local input, and that process was skipped. As a congressperson, I want to make sure, first of all EPA rules and regulations are passed, because one of the big concerns is that they're worried about safety, the health, the water, the air. That's important. And those questions were not answered in a public forum well in advance of this deal being done. And that's why people are upset, and they have a right to remain upset, and especially taxpayers, when you look at how much money is invested in that, and the rate of return for a company that hasn't produced that many cars, there's a problem there. There's a concern there. But more importantly, the local people had no say-so.
All right. Emma Hurt, your question.
This is a question for both candidates, starting with Mr. Collins. Do you support a total ban on abortion without exception, including in situations for the life of the mother?
I support a total ban on all abortion, period.
Okay. Mr. Jones?
He said a total ban on all abortion. Does that include no exceptions?
There are no exceptions, no ma'am.
Correct.
I support a total ban on abortions, no exceptions. I support what Georgia Right to Life supported. And let me be clear, that's why I want to go to Washington to defund Planned Parenthood, take that money and send that money so we can make our schools safe. That's what's most important. And by the way, if he was so supportive of pro-life, he never a single day came to the legislature and told any legislator to vote to save lives. Not a single time did he make an appearance. But now he's saying he's pro-life.
Emma, do you have a follow-up?
I do not.
All right.
Did you come down?
Raul, your question.
I wanted to follow up something you discussed earlier, Mr. Collins, and in terms of you made a general comment about arming people in schools. Would that include teachers in the classroom?
Yes, sir. I think you need to arm teachers in the classroom. I think you need to have, you could even use prior veteran military personnel and train them much the way they did in Florida, and have them work at these schools and protect these students. That, to me, that if we can secure our airports, and you know, you had people that killed over 3,000 folks with box cutters. Now, the day after that, we started securing our airports. Folks, we got to secure our schools. There are a number of issues that we have, but securing our schools and our students and our children should be on first and foremost on people's minds.
Is there a federal role for that to happen?
Well, we've spent billions and billions of dollars we've sent for COVID relief from the federal government. Where did that money go? That money could be being spent right now to secure these schools.
All right, Emma, your next question.
Representative Jones, do you support the ongoing prosecution of participants in the January 6th insurrection for crimes including violence against Capitol Police?
Anybody that commit a violent crime should be charged and convicted, but given a fair trial. Unlike my opponent, I went to Washington, D.C. that day. I stood up for election integrity. I still stand for election integrity. And many, matter of fact, 99.9% of those people have the right to go to their United States House of Representatives and senators to let them know how they feel. And as a matter of fact, the Rhino stayed home. He didn't want to be a part of it, but I went there, and my name is on that list from the January 6th committee. My name is there because I stood tall for election integrity. I'm unbought and unbossed. I'm not afraid. My opponent didn't go. He boycotted that too because he was afraid.
Mr. Collins, your rebuttal?
Yes, ma'am. December the 30th, I was working the polls there in Buds County doing poll watching, and about a half a dozen of us got taken out with COVID. So I was actually quarantined during that time frame, so I wasn't able to go, period. But you want to talk about the January 6th political prisoners? We had the opportunity last July to go to Washington, D.C., to stand up for those people because they are political prisoners and they need their day in court. I was one of 3 people. Mr. Jones had that opportunity too, but he didn't show up. He boycotted that, to use his words. But I was there, and I stood up for those people.
Mr. Jones, did you want a rebuttal?
You know what? Mike is consistently lying. He's going to continue to lie. I just want to know, Mike, do you really stand for election integrity?
You know, I didn't realize you were a moderator.
Because you didn't show up.
But there again, I had COVID during January 6th. Now, my daughter was in D.C. during January 6th.
That's an excuse. You did a fake quarantine. You hid.
All right, we're going to move on. Raul, do you have a question of one of the candidates?
I do have a question. I had it written here. Why am I blanking? That's right. The question to both gentlemen. Name a committee, just one committee, that you want to serve on if you're elected to Congress.
All right, we'll begin with you, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones.
Yes, I like to serve on the House Intelligence Committee. I want to get to the bottom of what happened with the elections, election integrity. That's important. I will continue to fight for a free, fair, and a transparent elections. And the federal government does have have a responsibility, a role, and that is to enforce the law, the federal laws. And I've seen here in Georgia federal laws not enforced, but I also know there were those who were infiltrated January 6th, and everybody has not been given due process. And I want to make sure that we find out what happened, what role that everybody played in this. But to go out and have political prosecution for people who are standing up for their rights, that's been abused, and I want to make sure we get to the bottom of that.
Mr. Collins?
Sure, I'd like to serve on the Transportation Committee or the Small Business Committee, either one. I think with my background of 30 years of being in the most regulated and taxed industry out there, and the pure fact that out of 435 members of Congress, there's not another person in the transportation business up there. And I tell you what, I think you can see right now just how important supply chain issues have been and will continue to be. And on top of that, you take a look at this infrastructure bill that was passed. It turned out to be nothing more but spending money on the Green New Deal. So sure, those are the two committees. I would take any committee that they would assign me. And also, I think that it's very important that we not only have oversight on January 6th, but we need to have oversight in every committee that there is. The Republicans are going to take the House big time. They're going to take back the Senate, but we need to be looking into every committee and have every oversight in each committee to see exactly what's been going on in this country.
Thank you, gentlemen. That is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Vernon Jones, you get the first closing statement.
You know, I was born and reared on a farm. My mama taught me the importance of hard work, faith-based, get a good education. My daddy didn't serve in Congress, but my dad did serve in the military. He's a veteran. He fought for this country, and he taught me how to fight. I'm not one of those that are going to be fighting to line my pockets to go get a PPP loan and give it to me and my business and not give it to truckers. I'm not going to be the one who's going to mail to Democrats running in a Republican primary. That goes to show intellectually someone being dishonest. If you're going to be a Republican, then be a Republican. But, you know, more importantly, when I go to Washington, I want to fight to secure our borders. I want to fight to make sure we have a balanced budget. I want to make sure that we rein in spending and that we do what we say we're going to do. Give me an opportunity. I'm a fighter. I've been Trump endorsed, Trump vetted, and Trump trusted. Might want to claim that he's a Trumpster, but he doesn't support President Trump. That's why President Trump rejected him. I want to say to the people of 10th District, too, you heard him lie on Jody Heiss, you heard him lie on others. He refused to even admit his daddy was a Democrat. We need someone who's going to go there and work
and get
to the issues.
Thank you very much. Mike Collins, please give your closing statement.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for having me. If you're looking for someone that is unapologetically pro-Trump, an America First agenda candidate, someone that has been conservative to the core their entire life, an outsider. See, my wife and I, for the past 30 years, we've been raising kids and starting a business. We've been involved in the trucking industry, the most regulated and taxed industry there is in this country. If you want somebody to go to Washington and stand up and fight, and I mean fight, to get this country back on track, then I need your help. Because folks, we need to send true warriors, true Republican warriors to Congress right now. I want to leave you with something that my dad always instilled in me from the time I was a small boy. This goes from business to social to even politics. He's always told me, he said, son, they got to trust you and they got to like you. Folks, this runoff is about trust. Who do you trust? I'd love to have your support and I'd love to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind you, voters, that Election Day is Tuesday, June 21st. And our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists, Emma Hurt and Raul Bali. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the debates they will host this election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. I'm Donna Lowry. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.